Snow fell quietly over Vancouver, covering the sidewalks with an almost cinematic delicacy, as if someone up above were trying to hide, under a white veil, the many inequalities that coexisted in that large coastal city of Canada. It was early December, and the cold wind cut through jackets, gloves, and even certainties. For many, it was a magical season. Christmas lights, decorated storefronts, hot chocolate in hand. For others, especially those struggling with poverty, it was just a painful reminder of how cruel the cold could be. Amid that social contrast lived Elliot Morgan, one of the most influential businessmen in British Columbia. At 57, tall, with neatly trimmed grey hair and a presence that seemed to fill any room, Elliot ran Morgan Enterprise, a conglomerate spanning civil construction, maritime logistics, and one of the largest mid-range restaurant chains in the province, the Harbour Light Diner. He was admired, feared, respected, and sometimes criticized with equal intensity. His estimated fortune exceeded 480 million Canadian dollars, a number that made headlines but didn't reveal who he truly was. Elliot had always been a strict man, disciplined, rational to the extreme. To him, the world was divided between those who worked hard and those who gave up. And often, that view made him blind to realities that didn't fit his beliefs. Despite his power and wealth, Elliot carried a past marked by emotional distance. His relationship with his son, Matthew Morgan, 32, was tense and cold. Matthew had pursued a career as a pediatric doctor, going against his father's expectations that he would eventually take on a leadership role in the family business. Although Matthew was dedicated, empathetic, and deeply humane, Elliot considered him too soft for the business world. Inflation weighed heavily, winter was unforgiving, and food was becoming increasingly scarce. Almost every week, Emily had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying groceries for 2 days. Liam knew this, not because his mother told him, but because he noticed. He always noticed. He was the kind of child who watched the world quietly, trying to understand why some people faced storms that others never even saw. On that morning, as the snow battered the streets, Liam walked with a used coat he'd received as a donation from the community school. It was Saturday, and Emily had left early to cover for a co-worker who had missed her shift, extra hours that, although poorly paid, were essential. Their fridge held half a loaf of bread, a bit of margarine, and a litre of milk close to expiring. For a growing child, that wasn't enough. Hunger pressed on him. The desire to ease his mother's worries pressed even harder. With a mix of courage and innocence, Liam made an unusual decision: ask for food, not beg. He always avoided that word, but ask. He thought of the busier restaurants on Howe Street, where tourists walked around and volunteers sometimes handed out soup. Maybe, just maybe, someone had a leftover roll, a potato, anything. And so he stepped into the Harbour Light Diner, the busiest unit in the chain, the one Elliot Morgan personally visited every week as a way to maintain the standard of excellence. The manager, Stephen Clark, a middle-aged man with a fake smile and rigid posture, moved around trying to impress anyone who might be watching. Stephen was known for his reputation. He treated well those who looked like they had money and treated with disdain anyone who didn't look appropriate for the place. When Liam pushed the glass door open, the bell chimed a small ding, but no one paid attention. Except Stephen, who immediately frowned when he saw the soaked boy with worn-out clothes and timid eyes. Liam walked carefully to the counter, taking a deep breath, trying to hide his fear. He placed his small hands on the counter, trembling from the cold. "Excuse me, I was just wondering if you have any food that's left over," Liam said, his voice low, nearly drowned out by the restaurant chatter. Stephen narrowed his eyes even further. "This isn't a charity shelter, kid," he replied coldly. "Leave before you bother the customers." He also saw Stephen's impatient expression, and instinctively, Elliot did what he was used to doing: he judged. In his mind, he immediately categorized Liam as a little vagrant, someone who needed to learn not to depend on sympathy. His face hardened. He believed he understood situations like that. At least he thought he did. It was easy for Elliot to imagine ready-made stories, lazy parents, children used to beg, emotional manipulation. He never considered that maybe it was more complex. Stephen, noticing the boss's gaze, decided to humiliate the boy further to show control of the environment. The humiliation echoed through the room. Some people looked away in discomfort. Others pretended not to see. No one stood up. No one said anything. No one except an elderly man sitting by the window. Gerald Thompson, a frequent customer, retired, always kind. He raised his hand, calling to the boy, "Hey kid, come here. I can get you something warm." Stephen is right. This restaurant isn't a place for begging. The boy needs to learn boundaries. That scene, humiliating, unfair, painful, would be the first domino in something much bigger, something Elliot couldn't even imagine. An event that, months later, would be tied to his name in national headlines, courtroom hearings, and a will that would change the course of 3 lives forever. Because there was something Elliot didn't know, something Stephen never imagined, something even Liam was unaware of. Elliot Morgan had a secret in his past. And that secret had everything to do with that boy. The door of the Harbor Light Diner closed behind Liam with a sharp, cold snap, almost cruel, as if even the sound wanted to reinforce his exclusion. He stepped out into the icy wind, feeling his stomach ache, not just from hunger, but from the weight of humiliation stamped into the muffled laughs and averted gazes inside the restaurant. Snow kept falling, clinging to his dark hair as he walked aimlessly, fighting back the tears that insisted on escaping. Liam had nowhere to go at that moment. Emily wouldn't be home until 8 that night, and he didn't want her to know what had happened. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to see her hurting even more. That innocent attempt to help had turned into a source of shame. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, the atmosphere among the staff was tense. Not because anyone openly disagreed with what Elliot and Stephen had done, but because everyone knew it was morally wrong, and they were trapped by the fear of losing their jobs. Employee Maya Singh couldn't shake the image of Liam trembling, speaking with that weak little voice, asking for a piece of food. She had seen plenty of poverty growing up, had seen many people underestimated, and it struck her deeply. In the kitchen, she vented to her co-worker Carlos Mendes, a Brazilian-Canadian line cook who'd been working there for 2 years. "You saw that, didn't you?" Maya whispered, stirring a pot to disguise the conversation. "The kid was hungry, Carlos. Hungry," she insisted, her voice trembling. "That boy could have been my little brother. Could have been me when I was a kid." From behind the glass, hidden by an improvised curtain, Maya took off her apron. Her gaze hardened. "I'm going after him." As Maya slipped out of the restaurant to find Liam, Elliot Morgan watched everything from afar. Not her leaving, but the tension rippling through the staff. He had returned to his table, yet the discomfort in his chest didn't go away. It wasn't guilt. He rarely felt guilt. It was something else. A familiar, unsettling sensation, almost buried. Something close to memory. He reread the report on his tablet, but the words blurred. The image of the boy haunted him. For some reason, Liam's eyes stirred up memories from decades ago. Memories of decisions Elliot had always justified as necessary, and therefore chose never to revisit. One of those memories involved a woman named Claire Parker, and Elliot did not want to think about Claire, ever. Meanwhile, Maya ran through the frozen streets searching for Liam. Her feet slipped on the snow packed along the sidewalks, but she kept going. After 4 blocks, she found the boy sitting behind a metal dumpster, trying to shield himself from the cutting wind. He was hugging his knees, breathing fast, trying not to cry anymore. Maya approached slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" No one deserves that. Maya didn't have extra money, but she had empathy, and right then that was worth more than any Canadian bill. "Come with me, I'm going to get you something to eat," she said, extending her hand. Liam hesitated. I don't want to cause trouble." At that same moment, inside the restaurant, Stephen watched everything through the security monitors. He saw Maya taking off her apron, saw her leaving through the back door, and his expression twisted with rage. "What does that girl think she's doing?" he barked, calling another employee. "Isabella, write this down. Maya is suspended for abandoning her post." But Carlos, listening from the edge of the kitchen, clenched his fists. "Coward," he muttered under his breath. Stephen heard. "Did you say something, Mendes?" "Do you like hot chocolate?" Maya asked. He nodded, still silent. She ordered 2 hot chocolates and an egg and cheese sandwich for him. She didn't order anything for herself. When the food arrived, Liam ate slowly at first, as if afraid someone might take it away. Then once he realized no one would, he ate a little faster. "Thank you," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what any decent person would." Because across the city, inside a law office tucked between modern buildings, a delicate document was being prepared. a document bearing the name Clarencia Parker Morgan, and inside that sealed envelope was something Elliot had spent his entire life trying to avoid: a will involving Liam. And once opened, it would dismantle everything Elliot believed about his past. The snow continued to fall, thin and steady over Vancouver, as Elliot left the Harbour Light Diner a few hours after the incident. Outside, the cold wind hit him abruptly, but it wasn't the weather that unsettled him. It was his own conscience, or something very close to it. He got into his car, adjusted the heater, and sat still for a few seconds, staring at his reflection in the window. Something had been haunting him since the moment he saw those eyes, Liam's eyes. Something he couldn't ignore. For an instant, Elliot felt the same sensation he'd had many years ago, when he received an unexpected call from a woman he hadn't heard from since his youth. Claire Parker. The memory surfaced without permission. A young woman with dark brown hair, a gentle smile, a deep gaze, and a voice that trembled whenever she tried to ask Elliot for something. She had asked for help, asked for understanding, and he had refused. He closed his eyes, trying to push the memory away. Not now, he thought, not now, but as always, what we avoid most is what ends up following us. Meanwhile, Maya and Liam were walking down the street. After eating, the boy seemed more alive, still hunched over, still shy, but with an expression Maya associated only with someone who hadn't been treated with kindness in a very long time. "Liam," she said as they walked, "do you live close by?" "I live in East Vancouver." There was an exaggerated humility in him, something that always pointed to a life marked by rejection. When they crossed the 3rd Street, Maya noticed something odd. Liam was gripping something in his pocket, a very simple necklace with a small, worn metal pendant. "That necklace, is it important to you?" she asked. The boy looked at his pocket, hesitating. "It was my mom's," he said quietly. "I mean, she gave it to me. The other one. My real mom, she died when I was really little. Emily adopted me when I was 4. Emily said I used to hold it even while I slept." He arrived at the glass building of Morgan Enterprise, where employees straightened their posture as soon as they saw him. He walked past them with his usual presence, rigid, cold, impeccable. But something was throwing him off balance. He entered his office on the 21st floor, with a wide view of the Vancouver Harbour stretching outside the window. He placed his wool coat on the chair, took a deep breath, and sat at his desk. But the reports didn't flow. The numbers meant nothing. For the first time in many years, Elliot could not use work as an emotional shield. Finally, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he had kept for years but rarely used. "Dawson and Bennett Law Office," answered a soft female voice. "This is Elliot Morgan. I'm calling to speak with Mr. Dawson. Dawson passed away last year. Is your adoptive mom home?" While Liam climbed the old staircase of the humble building, Elliot arrived at the sleek Dawson and Bennett office near downtown Vancouver. The contrast was immense. A starving boy trying to survive, and a millionaire drowning in a past that hunted him. The lawyer, Arthur Bennett, around 60, elegantly grey-haired, greeted him with a formal handshake. "Morgan, thank you for coming." Bennett pulled out a dark blue folder. Carefully, he retrieved a sealed envelope, closed with wax, something rare these days. On the front, it read, "For Elliot Morgan, to be delivered only upon my death." The snow continued to fall, fine and steady over Vancouver, as Elliot left the Harbour Light Diner a few hours after the incident. Outside, the cold wind struck him suddenly, but it wasn't the weather that made him uncomfortable. It was his own conscience, or something very close to it. He got into his car, turned on the heater, and sat still for a few seconds, staring at his reflection in the window. Something had been unsettling him ever since he saw those eyes, Liam's eyes. Something he couldn't ignore. For a moment, Elliot felt the same sensation he'd felt many years earlier, when he received an unexpected phone call from a woman he hadn't heard from since his youth, Claire Parker. The memory surfaced without permission. A young woman with dark brown hair, a gentle smile, a deep gaze, and a voice that trembled whenever she tried to ask Elliot for something. She had asked for help, asked for understanding, and he had refused. He closed his eyes, trying to push the memory away. Not now, he thought, not now. But as always, what we try hardest to outrun is what ends up following us. Meanwhile, Maya and Liam were walking down the street. After eating, the boy looked more alive, still small, still shy, but with an expression Maya recognized in those who had gone far too long without being treated with kindness. "Liam," she said as they walked. "Do you live close to here?" "I live in East Vancouver." There was an exaggerated humility in him, and that always indicated a life marked by rejection. When they crossed the 3rd Street, Maya noticed something peculiar. Liam was holding something inside his pocket, a simple necklace with a small, worn metal pendant. "That necklace, is it important to you?" she asked. The boy looked down at his pocket, hesitating. "It was my mum's," he said quietly. "I mean, she gave it to me. The other one, my real mom, she died when I was really little. Emily adopted me when I was 4. Emily said I used to hold on to it even while I slept." He arrived at the glass tower of Morgan Enterprise, where employees straightened their posture upon seeing him. He walked past them with his usual demeanor, rigid, cold, impeccable. Yet something was knocking him off balance. He entered his office on the 21st floor, a wide view of the Vancouver harbor stretching across the window. He laid his wool coat over the chair, took a deep breath, and sat at his desk. But the reports didn't flow. The numbers meant nothing. For the first time in many years, Elliot couldn't bury himself in work as an emotional shield. Finally, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he had saved long ago, but rarely used. "Dawson and Bennett Law Office," answered a gentle female voice. "This is Elliot Morgan. I'm calling to speak with Mr. Dawson." Not an ordinary silence, a heavy one. "Mr. Morgan, yes, these documents were updated recently, actually. I received specific instructions from Dawson before he passed. Is your adoptive mom home?" Maya pulled a small scribbled card from her backpack and handed it to him. "This is my number. If you ever need help, anything at all, you can call me. I'm here, okay?" While Liam climbed the worn staircase of the modest building, Elliot arrived at the elegant Dawson and Bennett office near downtown Vancouver. The contrast was striking. A hungry boy trying to survive, and a millionaire haunted by a past catching up to him. The lawyer, Arthur Bennett, a man in his 60s, elegantly gray-haired, greeted him with a formal handshake. "Morgan, thank you for coming." Bennett picked up a dark blue folder. Carefully, he pulled out a wax-sealed envelope, something rare these days. On the front it read, "For Elliot Morgan, to be delivered only upon my death." What detail? The snow had stopped falling, but the air was still cold when Elliot left the Dawson and Bennett Law Office building. The revelation about Liam pulsed inside him like a drum. All the rationality, the self-control, the pride he had built over the years had crumbled in a matter of minutes, as if the past were collecting all the accumulated interest on an emotional debt that could never be paid. He got into the car, started the engine, and sat there, taking deep breaths. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know if he should drive to the building where Liam lived. He didn't know if he should wait. He didn't know if he even had the right to knock on that door. But he knew one thing. He needed to see the boy again. He needed to confirm or deny what his instincts were already telling him. Meanwhile, in the small East Vancouver apartment, Emily Parker was making a simple dinner, vegetable soup thickened with pasta. It was what their budget allowed, but she always tried to make it more flavorful, so Liam wouldn't realize the vegetables were actually leftovers donated from a community market. Liam, sitting at the table, was trying to draw on a sheet of recycled paper. It was a drawing of a big house with huge windows and a garden lit by lights. It was his dream house, even though he had never seen one like it up close. As he drew, he imagined what it would be like to have a big family. A family that didn't feel cold, that didn't fear late rent, that didn't have to water down the milk to make it last longer. "That drawing looks nice, honey," Emily said with a faint smile. "Whose house is that?" In his mind, Maya had gotten what she deserved. Immediate suspension and likely dismissal as soon as Elliot was informed of her undisciplined behavior. But something unexpected happened. In the middle of the shift, Stephen's phone buzzed. He answered quickly. "Stephen Clark speaking. Morgan requested a detailed report on the incident involving a boy this morning. He said he'll return to the restaurant personally to review the footage and hear from witnesses." The wind hit her face, but the ache in her chest was far worse than the cold. She thought about Liam, thought about the injustice he'd suffered, thought about his future, and thought about her own firing. She took a deep breath. She had already decided she wouldn't return to the diner, but she had no idea how she'd pay rent that month if she lost her job. Her parents had moved to Calgary and could hardly help her. That was when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Maya answered. "Hello?" he asked. "It's important." When Liam appeared, trembling at the counter, Stephen felt a stab in his stomach, not of guilt but of worry. He knew that if Elliot saw that footage, he'd realize the situation was far more serious than Stephen had tried to portray. Elliot wasn't a perfect man, but he was a smart one. He would recognize injustice, and worse, he would recognize cruelty. Stephen had to act before the cameras spoke for themselves. So he did what he always did when he wanted to manipulate something. He saved part of the footage onto a personal USB drive, prepared another edited version, and placed that one into the main system. In the edited version, he toned down his own aggression, cutting the crucial moments where he called Liam a beggar, trash, and a nuisance. He also boosted the background noise in the parts where Maya confronted him, so that her words were barely audible. Stephen had always believed that controlling the narrative meant controlling the power, but he had no idea that this would become one of the biggest traps he'd ever set for himself. Meanwhile, Elliot was waiting for Maya in his office on the 21st floor, staring out the window. For the first time in decades, he found himself looking at the city, not as a businessman, but as a human being. "Liam, my son," he murmured, barely audible. The word son felt too big to fit in his mouth, too heavy, too late. When his assistant announced Maya's arrival, Elliot adjusted his jacket, drew a deep breath, and asked them to show her in. Maya walked in cautiously. She was nervous. How could she not be? But kept her gaze steady. "Mr. Morgan." And he said he was adopted after his mom died, that her name was Connie Claire. "He's my son." And Stephen had already started his own silent war. Across the city, Stephen contacted another manager from the chain and sent him the altered footage. "I need this to be the only version sent to the administrative department," he said, "and make sure no one else touches it." But in reality, he was digging his own grave. Elliot grabbed his coat as Maya stood up as well. "I'm going with you," she said. "I promised him I'd be there if he needed me, and I think he will." And as they walked toward the car, the silent narrator of life, fate itself, had already set the next piece in motion, the emotional storm that was about to fall on all of them. Elliot Morgan didn't know it yet, but Stephen was also on his way towards something. And worse, Emily Parker would receive a visitor before Elliot arrived, a visitor who would put at risk not only the custody of the boy, but the integrity of the whole truth. The sky over Vancouver was starting to darken as the first streetlights flicked on, casting yellowish reflections over the snow piled up in the corners of the sidewalks. The cold was intensifying, and the cutting wind was promising a harsh night for anyone without enough layers of clothing or emotional protection. In Emily Parker's small apartment in East Vancouver, the atmosphere was one of fragile peace. Liam was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a worn-out blanket, watching an old cartoon on TV. He wasn't really paying attention. His mind kept going back, again and again, to the scene at the restaurant. Stephen's voice still echoed in his head. "Go dig through the garbage if you're that hungry." The soup hadn't been much, but it was enough to warm them a little. She hummed softly to herself, almost under her breath, trying to fight the exhaustion. Her body ached. Her hands, cracked from the cold, betrayed the long shifts at the laundromat. A sudden sound shattered that fragile normality. Knock, 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 firm knocks at the door. Emily looked at the clock. It was still early for a neighbor to be asking for sugar or complaining about the TV volume. She frowned, wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door. "Who is it?" she asked, wary. "British Columbia Child Protection Services," answered a serious male voice. "We need to speak with Ms. Parker." "This is social worker Rachel Lowe. We received a report involving your son Liam." Emily burst out instinctively. "I would never— My God, who did this?" Rachel stepped closer cautiously. "Ms. Parker, this is serious. We understand financial hardship, but exposing a minor to humiliation and risky situations on the streets is unacceptable. There are reports that he was thrown out of a restaurant after trying to get food. The report says you don't provide adequate food, and that he often goes out alone, hungry, to fend for himself. We're going to need to do a deeper assessment," Daniel said. "But as a matter of protocol, when there is immediate risk, we can order temporary placement until the facts are clarified." "Parker," Daniel cut in, his tone trying to be understanding but still cold, "we're not here as enemies. We're here to ensure the child's safety. If nothing is found, he'll be returned to you. But for now, we have to act based on the information we received, and at the same time destroy a family." Someone like Stephen Clark, who a few hours earlier had written a detailed email to social services describing Liam as an abandoned boy, clearly starving, sent by his mother to solicit food from businesses, in a state of risk. He had presented himself as a concerned witness for the child's safety. While all of that was unfolding, Elliot Morgan was driving toward East Vancouver with Maya Singh in the passenger seat. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Maya stole discreet glances at his face, seeing an expression she never imagined she'd see on that man. Genuine pain. "You really didn't know?" she asked after a while. Elliot took some time to answer. "I knew, in the past, that there was a possibility," he confessed, "but I didn't want to hear it. Claire came to me. She tried to talk. I was obsessed with expanding the company. I thought a child would ruin everything. I sent her away. And that I humiliated my own son without knowing. He was just hungry. I don't want to go anywhere else. We have homes prepared for this. But here, there was too much love in those words for it to be fake. Even so, protocol was protocol. And Liam, at 11 years old, was about to relive an old trauma, being taken from his family once again. When Elliot and Maya turned onto the street where the building stood, they saw a scene that made their blood run cold. An unmarked vehicle parked there, a social services car, and a boy being guided into the back seat with a small backpack on his shoulders. "Liam." Maya put a hand to her chest. "Oh my God, and they're taking him." "He's..." she asked, her voice hoarse. Elliot looked at her. "Emily," he said, recognizing her face from old photos Claire had sent him years ago. "We need to talk. About Claire. About Liam." Elliot almost laughed bitterly. "You're tearing a boy away from the only place where he feels loved." Liam, eyes full of tears, looked from the elegant, anguished man to his adoptive mother, completely lost. "Mom," he asked, "what is he talking about?" She said, her voice falling apart. "Before you came to live with me, there was another story. A story I never managed to tell you properly. I needed time, but it looks like time didn't want to wait." "I don't want to go," he shouted. "I don't want to go with them. I don't want to leave my mom." And she had a very strong guess who. Stephen. That man had used a boy's pain as a piece in a dirty game to protect his own image in the company. And now, an 11-year-old was paying the price of a cold system and of cowardly adults. Liam was placed in the back seat of the car. The door closed with a sound he recognized from somewhere deep in his memory, the click of abandonment. He looked out the window. He saw Emily crying, surrounded by curious neighbors. He saw Maya with her hand over her mouth in shock. He saw Elliot standing still, with the look of someone who had just lost something he didn't even know he had. The car started moving. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass. For the second time in his life, Liam was being taken away from home. And this time what hurt wasn't just the fear of the unknown. It was the question that kept hammering inside him. If this man really is my dad, why did it take him so long to show up? For now, though, the picture was this: a boy taken, a mother shattered, a father who realized too late, and a truth suffocated by an unjust system and by people still pulling strings in the shadows. Everything seemed lost, and in Liam's eyes, it felt like no one in the world was truly on his side. The DNA test printout was still warm when Elliot took a step back, staring at the result as if he were holding his own past on paper. Those numbers, 99, 7%, were more than a biological confirmation. They were a sentence, a reckoning, a second chance he never thought he'd have. Liam, still seated, was gripping his pendant tightly. Emily had a hand on his shoulder. Maya stood beside him, like a bridge between two worlds. And in that moment, Elliot knew he needed to make decisions, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as a father, something he had never dared to try to be. Director Harrington cleared his throat. "Mr. Morgan, with this result, the situation changes completely. But we still need to deal with the report, the open procedure, and the current condition of the child's custody." "And I can prove it," Harrington said. "Then this case changes completely, and we'll immediately reinstate custody." "You're going back home, yes?" Elliot said, placing his hand over the boy's small hand. "Today, right now, and I'll be there with you, if you want me to." Emily opened the door with a trembling hand. Liam walked in first, as if he were stepping back into his own world. He dropped his backpack, ran to the couch, and burrowed into his blanket, as if reclaiming a lost piece of himself. Emily dropped to the floor beside him, wrapping him in her arms. "Never again," she whispered. "Never again will you go through this alone." Envy of a mother who had given everything he never had. Once Liam had calmed down a little, Emily stood up and looked at Elliot. "We need to talk, alone. I was with her at the end. I saw what the illness did to her. I saw her fear that Liam would be left alone, and the only thing she wanted was for you to know him. The silence of someone who, even against her will, could tell the man in front of her was different. There are 3 rules, she said at last. 3. Until the door was thrown open. Carlos Mendez walked in, followed by 2 other employees. We need to talk, Stephen. Because unlike you, we have a conscience. Calling him trash, telling him to eat off the floor, mocking his hunger. And Elliot, sitting in the back, watching, not acting. He closed the phone abruptly, heart heavy. He's going to pay for this, Elliot said in a tone Emily overheard. Don't do anything that'll hurt Liam, she said immediately. I won't, he replied, but I will protect what's ours. The next day, Elliot called an emergency meeting. All directors, lawyers, and the board were present. Stephen was summoned without knowing what it was about. When he walked in, he found a heavy atmosphere, and Elliot, in the center of the room, with the original footage projected on the screen. Stephen swallowed hard. Mr. Morgan, I can explain. You caused pain to a family that had nothing but their dignity, and you used my company's name to justify your cruelty. We're going to open doors. We're going to help. Not as an intruder, but as someone trying to learn what it means to be a father. He brought groceries for Emily, brought books for Liam, brought time, which was the most valuable thing. Liam still didn't fully trust him. It would take time, but Elliot was willing to wait. The truth had come to light. The antagonist's mask had fallen, and the turning point was underway. What was left now was to heal the past and build something new. Winter had begun to slowly say goodbye to Vancouver. The snow was melting into clear puddles along the streets. The icy wind was giving way to softer breezes, and the days seemed to stretch a little longer, as if the city itself were finally breathing a bit easier. In Emily Parker's small house, something similar was happening. The pain from everything that had happened was still there, of course. Trauma doesn't melt away like snow, but there was a new light now. A quiet, steady presence, and in a surprising way, a comforting one. Elliot Morgan was trying, honestly, deeply, humbly trying. In the first week after the truth came out, he started showing up carefully, never barging in, always calling first, always asking if he could help. Emily, still wary, set clear boundaries, but she also noticed something she hadn't expected. He genuinely wanted to be there. Not to take the boy, but to learn how to become part of his life. And Maya, always around, acted as an emotional bridge. Someone who explained simple things to Elliot that he had never lived. How to talk to a child without sounding intimidating. How to listen without trying to fix everything with money. How to kneel down and see the world from Liam's height. And Elliot learned. Change started with small things. On the first Saturday, he showed up with a box of books. They're about astronomy, adventures, mysteries. I don't really know what he likes, he said, a bit awkwardly. Emily looked through the titles. He's going to love these, thank you. Liam, sitting on the couch, just watched. The wary look was still there, but so was curiosity. He didn't touch the books that day, but that night when Emily was already asleep, Liam quietly opened the box, pulled out a blue-covered book, The Universe and Its Secrets, and started reading under the dim light in the hallway. The next day, when Elliot showed up, Liam asked, "Do you like stars?" Elliot smiled, surprised. "I always did. When I was a kid, I used to imagine every star was a choice I could make." "You chose wrong, huh?" Liam replied, not cruelly, just with childlike honesty. Elliot swallowed hard. "Yes, I chose wrong, but I'm trying to choose, right now." Liam nodded, and for the first time he smiled for real. That smile changed everything. After that, Elliot began to understand that their relationship wouldn't be built on grand gestures, but on consistency, on being there, on humility, on the simple act of showing up, listening, staying. And that's what he did. He brought Emily coffee before work, not as charity but as support. He walked with Liam to school when the boy allowed it. He helped fix small things in the apartment, not pushing expensive renovations, but offering practical help. He asked questions, lots of them, because he had never known what it was like to be a father, but he wanted to learn. And Emily, who once saw him as a threat, started to see him as someone trying to repair old ruins with trembling but sincere hands. One day, Emily asked to talk to him while Liam worked on a school assignment. "I wanted to say something," she began, holding a cup of tea. "Liam is better. Since you started showing up more, he sleeps better. He eats better. He talks more." Elliot took a deep breath. "I feel guilty about that." "You shouldn't," Emily said. Guilt doesn't change the past, but your presence changed his present. That matters. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to carve that sentence into his mind. Thank you, he murmured. Emily gave a faint smile. Just don't screw it up. Elliot laughed. A real laugh. The first she'd ever heard from him. Across the city, Maya watched all of this with quiet joy. She was still working temporarily at the harbour, while searching for a new permanent job, having formally refused to return to the restaurant, even after Stephen's firing. One day, while helping unload trucks, she got a message on her phone. Liam wants to see you today. Can you come by? Emily. Maya's heart warmed. That afternoon, she went to the apartment. Liam greeted her with a tight hug, so tight she almost fell back. I missed you, he said. I missed you too, little one, she replied, moved. They spent hours drawing, talking about school, laughing, and little by little, Maya became something like an older sister to him, a presence that made the world feel safer. And Elliot understood that. So he respected it, was grateful for it, and never tried to compete. But healing wasn't only emotional. Elliot made practical and transformative decisions. Morgan Enterprise officially launched a program, Claire Parker Project, Humanized Dining Halls. The name brought Emily to tears when she heard it. It's beautiful, she said, touching the pamphlet. Elliot explained, I don't want any other boy walking into one of my restaurants just to be humiliated for asking for food. I want him to get a meal and dignity. For the first time in his life, he saw pride in Emily's eyes. Change also reached the restaurant. With Stephen fired and under investigation for fraud, mistreatment, and false reporting to social services, Elliot promoted Carlos Mendez to general manager, something that completely caught the Brazilian off guard. I don't know what to say, Carlos stammered, emotional. Say you're not going to let anyone go hungry in my restaurant, Elliot replied. Carlos smiled. I never did. I never will. Meanwhile, Liam was growing in quiet ways. He started eating better, sleeping better, laughing more. One afternoon, as Elliot helped him with his math homework, the boy asked, Dad, do you think Claire would have liked me? The word Dad almost made Elliot cry on the spot. I'm sure of it, he said, his voice thick. You're the best part of her, and he drew a deep breath. The best part of me too. Liam smiled shyly. You think she sees me from somewhere? Elliot ran a hand gently through his hair. I think she always has. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. Elliot started learning what Liam really liked. Simple pancakes, not fancy ones, bedtime stories, funny drawings of ducks, tight hugs, but not too long, comfortable silence, cheap hot chocolate, walking past shop windows without buying anything, talking about Claire without feeling weighed down, and Liam started learning what Elliot had never shown anyone. The fear of not being good enough, the regret that ate away at him, the insecurity hidden behind expensive suits, the deep loneliness he had never admitted to, and slowly, they began to build something that neither poverty, nor abandonment, nor the past could stop. A family, fragmented, patched together, imperfect, but real. At the end of the month, Emily, Elliot, and Maya were called into social services for an official update. Rachel walked in with an envelope. Well, she said, we're officially closing the case. The report has been confirmed as false, and the person responsible is already under criminal investigation. Emily let out a long sigh of relief. And about... She hesitated. Custody? Rachel smiled. You'll enter a joint agreement. Legal custody with Emily. Shared emotional custody with Elliot. That is, if everyone agrees. Emily looked at Elliot. Elliot looked at Liam. Liam smiled. I want both. And in that moment, Emily placed her hand over Elliot's. Then, both it is. After the meeting outside the building, Liam tugged on Elliot's hand. Dad, can I show you something? Elliot knelt down. Of course. Liam pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a drawing. A man, a woman, and a boy, holding hands, smiling, under a starry sky. It's us, Liam said. Elliot took a deep breath, feeling his heart finally find a place where it could rest. Healing wasn't instant. The pain hadn't vanished, but something new was being born. And for the first time in his life, Elliot Morgan wasn't afraid of the future. The months went by, and Vancouver looked different in the eyes of those who had gone through a winter far too harsh to be called just cold. Spring brought not only flowers in the parks and brighter days, but also a kind of quiet rebirth in the lives of three people: Liam, Emily, and Elliot. On the outside, the city kept its usual pace. On the inside, something deep had changed, and the world was about to find out. The fallout from the case involving the false report, Liam's humiliation, and the involvement of one of the most influential businessmen in Canada didn't take long to hit the media. Manager of famous chain accused of humiliating hungry child. Billionaire businessman acknowledges forgotten son from his past. Claire Parker project launched to fight hunger in restaurants. The Harbour Light Diner, the same location where Liam had been humiliated, was closed to the public that evening, not because of a problem, but for a symbolic reopening. On the front, a new sign had been installed in smaller letters beneath the chain's name: Claire Parker Project, No Child Leaves Hungry. Instead of just regular customers, there were employees, community representatives, volunteers, social workers, and some vulnerable children who had been invited for a special dinner. At the back of the dining room, a small metal plaque had been fixed to the wall with a simple inscription: in memory of Claire Parker, who believed no child should be humiliated for being hungry. She held Liam's hand. He was wearing a dress shirt for the first time and kept fiddling with the collar as if he still wasn't used to it. "She would have liked this, you know," Emily said softly. "I know," Elliot replied, standing beside them. "She'd yell at me first and only afterwards admit she was proud." In the center, a small improvised stage with a microphone. The administrative director, Bradley, gave a brief introduction. Then he passed the microphone to Elliot. He went up on stage without the cold confidence he used to have, but with something better: honesty. "Good evening," he began, looking out at the room. "Tonight is not a grand opening. It's a night of making things right." He asked for food, and instead of being welcomed, he was humiliated, thrown out, hurt. He drew a deep breath. "I was here, I saw it, and I did nothing." He was a man who had nearly lost his son before even knowing him. "After that," he continued, "I found out something that changed me on the inside. That boy wasn't just a hungry kid in Vancouver. He was my son, the son I refused to meet in the past, the son of a woman I also didn't know how to love properly, Claire." "There's no speech that can erase what I did," Elliot said, "but there is action. And today I'm not here to clean my name. I'm here to honor theirs." "We're also funding family support centers in partnership with social services," he went on. "We're going to support single mothers, struggling fathers, people who, like Emily, do the impossible to protect their children. Because no one should be punished for being poor. Poverty is not a crime, cruelty is." "And finally," Elliot said, "I want to say something as a man, not a businessman. I failed, and we all fail when we allow a child to be treated like garbage. But this boy is not garbage. He is an heir, not to money, but to a story that we're now rewriting together." He looked at Maya, who smiled faintly and whispered, "It's your choice, little one. I don't want that to be the only thing we remember, so I want to try." After the speech, the evening went on with a community dinner. Children ate without rushing, without fear. Staff served them with genuine smiles, not out of obligation, but because they believed in the cause. Carlos, now the manager, passed by the table where Emily, Liam, Elliot, and Maya were sitting. "Everything okay here?" he asked. "It's great," Emily said. "Thank you, Carlos, for helping with the footage. You're the ones who saved that boy." Liam was 16 now, taller, with a more defined face, but the same eyes, intense, observant, deep. He wore a jacket with the Claire Parker Project logo stitched over his chest. That day, he walked through the Harbour Light Diner, not as a customer or a victim, but as a speaker. A small circle of teenagers listened at the back while he said, "I know what it's like to feel ashamed for asking for help," he told them. "But the truth is, the ones who should be ashamed weren't me. And they're not you either. It's the people who look away." By the window, Elliot, now with more grey hair, watched everything with a soft smile. He was no longer just Vancouver's cold millionaire. He was the man who had learned to apologize, to listen, to share. His relationship with Liam wasn't perfect. It never would be. There were scars, hard conversations, days of distance, but there was something that hadn't existed before: trust. Every now and then, when leaving the restaurant at night, the two would walk together down the sidewalk, looking up at the sky. "Dad, remember when you said each star was a choice?" Liam asked once. "I remember. If you're asking if I'd choose you 1,000 times. because someone decided to change, and above all, because a boy had the courage to keep feeling, even when the world tried to break him. If you've made it this far with an open heart, thank you so much for following this story to the end. And if this narrative moved you in any way, if it touched you, upset you, made you think about empathy, second chances, and responsibility, then leave a like so this story can reach more people. Subscribe to the channel to follow more emotional stories like this one, full of twists, humanity, and reflection. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next story.